Hashkiveinu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom V'hamidenu malkeinu lechaim Hashkiveinu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom V'hamidenu malkeinu lechaim.
Hashkiveinu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom V'hamidenu malkeinu lechaim. Hashkiveinu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom V'hamidenu malkeinu lechaim. Ushmor Zetenu Uvoenu Lechaim Ushalom Me'ata ve'ad olam.
Hashkiveinu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom V'hamidenu malkeinu lechaim. Hashkiveinu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom
Hashkiveinu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom V'hamidenu
Eloheinu leshalom
Hashkiveinu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom V'hamidenu
Adonai Eloheinu leshalom
Hashkiveinu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom V'hamidenu malkeinu
Good evening, Shabbat Shalom. We enter this space of prayer and community, perhaps with a sense of emotional fragility from the week that was. Some of us are exhausted from crying in the school drop-off line or from allowing ourselves to think about the depths of tragedy this country has faced and the overwhelming grief of the parents of the 19 children and the 2 teachers who were killed at Robb Elementary School. Some of us are numb, choosing to wall off the emotions that we can't yet face or the hopelessness of intractable political conflict that makes these very preventable deaths commonplace. Some of us are angry. Yet we all have chosen to enter this space together, seeking comfort perhaps in ritual and in community and in the songs and prayers of Shabbat. May our time together this evening be a salve for broken hearts. May our time together this evening remind us of the good that still exists in this world. May our time together this evening restore our resolve to embody the highest values we reiterate in our prayer service this evening. We begin, as we are wont to do, on page 10, recognizing how wonderful it is to come together tonight.
הנה מה טוב מה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב מה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב מה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב מה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד.
I think we need but a few more songs, perhaps, to sing our way in, to lift our spirits as we join together. So just cast your eyes to the opposite side of the page, page 11, as we continue in song together.
כי השמר השבת אל ישמרני, כי השמר השבת אל ישמרני, אותי לעולם אחד בינו וביני, אותי לעולם אחד בינו וביני, כי השמר השבת אל ישמרני, כי השמר השבת אל ישמרני, אותי לעולם אחד בינו וביני, אותי לעולם אחד בינו וביני. מה יפה היום, שבת שלום, מה יפה היום, שבת שלום, שבת שבת שלום, שבת שבת שלום, שבת שבת שלום, שבת שלום. מה יפה היום, שבת שלום, מה יפה היום, Shabbat Shalom.
I invite you now to turn back in your prayer books to page 2, as it is my pleasure to invite Alice Mahler forward to kindle the lights of Shabbat, bringing some much needed light into this world as we begin our Sabbath day. Page 2 in your prayer book.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kedeshanu b'mitzvot tov v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of the universe, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to kindle the lights of Shabbat. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Thank you so much. And I invite you now to turn to page 5 in your prayer books. Rabbi Mark Goodman, a Pittsburgh colleague, among other rabbis and scholars this week, sought to remind us that in Jewish tradition, when we say a blessing, we must immediately do the corresponding action. We say the blessing over bread, and we take a piece of bread. We say the blessing over putting on our talit, and we put on our prayer shawl. We say the blessing over the fruit of the vine, and we immediately take a sip of the fruit of the vine. To do anything else in Jewish tradition is a bracha levatala, a blessing, a false promise, a violation of the commandment against taking God's name in vain. To offer prayers without corresponding actions is a transgression against God's self. And so as we turn to page 5, as we rise as a community to join in this blessing, I will sip symbolically for all of us as we recognize the sweetness of Shabbat. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho be'ahava uvratzon hinchilanu zikaron l'maaseh v'reishit ki hu yom tehillah le'mikra'ei kodesh zecher letziat Mitzrayim ki banu v'charta v'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim v'shabbat kodshecha be'ahava uvratzon hinchatanu. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh hashabbat. L'chaim. And I invite you to be seated as we turn in our prayer books now as we continue to sing our way into Shabbat. Shiru Ladonai, page 13, in the English on page 14. It's the Julie Silver version, you know it.
Shiru Ladonai kol haaretz. Shiru Ladonai shir chadash. Shiru Ladonai kol haaretz. Shiru Ladonai shir chadash. Sing unto God all the earth a new song. I will sing unto God a new song. Sing unto God and we'll all sing along. All the earth a new song unto God. Shiru Ladonai kol haaretz. Shiru Ladonai shir chadash. I will sing unto God a new song.
It was wonderful to have Melvatz with us last week, leading us in song and prayer. And after the service, I realized that I think that's the first time that Rabbi Emily and I have ever knowingly shared the same pulpit. Unless you count being trapped together in our basement, as we all were during the period of COVID, it's really the first time that we had been elbowing each other for space at the same pulpit rather than on camera. I think we did okay as well, but it reminded me of that time when we were in our basement, when we were choosing melodies that were perhaps better known to us than to many in the congregation, because I hadn't yet had a chance to learn the melodies that were so beloved in the congregation. And indeed, one of those melodies is one of our favorites for Lecha Dodi, which you can find on pages 20 and 21. Think of this as a throwback to a year and a half ago. It's wonderful to hear it when we can be together in person, and I hope you'll join us.
Lecha Dodi likat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekavela. Lecha Dodi likat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekavela. Lecha Dodi likat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekavela. nekabela, lecharoti likat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela, shamor vezachor b'dibor echad, Hishmianu el ha-meyuchad, Adonai echad u'shmo echad, l'shem u'tiferet v'lithilah, lecharoti likat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela, lecharoti likat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela, likat Shabbat lechu v'necha, ki mekor habracha, merosh mikedem nesucha, sof maaseh b'machshvat tchila, lecharoti likat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela, lecharoti likat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela, hitoreri, ki va'orech kumi ori, uri, shir daberi, kivod Adonai alayich nigla, lecharoti likat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela, lecharoti likat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela.
I invite you to rise if comfortable.
Boi v'shalom ateret ba'ala, gam b'simcha u'tzola, toch emunei am segura, boi chala, lecharoti likat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela, lecharoti likat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela.
Well, you're up anyways. This is a perfect time to turn to the people around you to wish them a Shabbat Shalom as we begin our service together. And if you're with us in sacred virtual community, please feel free to use those comment boxes. Shabbat Shalom. And when you have finished your greetings, you are welcome to again be seated as we continue the words of welcoming, page 24, with Shalom Aleichem.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Barechem L'Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Baruchuni L'Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Tzedchem L'Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Would you join me in the English in the middle of page 27? Teach me, O God, a blessing, a prayer, on the mystery of a withered leaf, on ripened fruit so fair, on the freedom to see, to sense, to breathe, to know, to hope, to despair. Teach my lips a blessing, a hymn of praise, as each morning and night you renew your days, lest my day be today as the one before, lest routine set my ways. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba Me'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei B'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayedecho beit Yisrael Bagala uv'izman kariv v'yimeru Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevarach Le'alam Ulam Me'amaya Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yipar V'yitramam V'yitnaseh V'yithadar V'yitale V'yithalal Shemei Dekudesha B'richu Le'la Mincho Birchata V'shirata Tushbechata v'nechamata damiran belma v'meru. Amen. On page 28, we find our Baruch Hu praise, and I again invite you to rise if it's comfortable for you to do so.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach Baruch Adonai HaMevorach HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed HaMevorach HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed.
And on the top of page 31, praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides a sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, you guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Baruch atah Adonai, Hama'ariv Aravim. And on the following page.
Ahavat Olam Beit Yisrael Amcha Amchavta Torah u'mitzvot Chukim u'mishpatim Otanu limadeta Otanu limadeta Akein Adonai Eloheinu b'shochbenu V'kumenu nasiach b'chukecha ונשמח בדברי תורתך ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו ובהם נגי יומם ולילה נגי יומם ולילה ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל אוהב עמו ישראל.
And on pages 34 and 35.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai olam va'ed.
You may be seated.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם, ושבתך בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ושוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
We turn in our prayer books to page 40, there finding words of Mi Chamocha, and we continue on this day to move through the space between Passover that was and Shavuot that will be, numbering the days, counting down from our freedom in Egypt to our responsibility given to us at Sinai. It's not enough, our tradition taught, that we should take that freedom. We have to do something with it. We have to live out those values contained within the commandments. To accept that freedom without the corresponding action, that too perhaps is an affront to our God. So we sing this reminder of freedom. We prepare ourselves to action on Shavuot and the giving of the commandments to come, page 40.
Yai lai lai la lai la 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 lai. Yai lai lai la lai la 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 lai. Yai lai la lai la 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 lai. Yai lai lai la 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 lai. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nehera b'kodesh, nora tehila osefela, nora tehila osefela. Malechutecha ra'uvanecha, bokeyam lifnei Moshe u'Miriam, Zelianu ve'ameru, Zelianu ve'ameru, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed. Yai lai lai la lai la 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 lai. Yai lai lai la lai la 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 lai. Yai lai la lai lai ya la 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 lai. Yai lai 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 ya la la lai lai.
Would you join me in the English on the bottom of page 43? Give us a place to rest, Adonai, our God. Bring us into shelter in the soft, long evening shadows of your truth. For with you are true protection and safety, and in your presence are acceptance and gentle love. Watch over us as we go forth. Prepare for us as we return. Spread over us your shelter of peace, over all we love, over our Jerusalem and yours. Baruch atah Adonai, hapores sukat shalom aleinu, ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim.
Baruch atah Adonai haborei sukat shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al כל עמו, ועל ירושלים שלום. ברוך אתה, אתה אדוני הבורא סוכת שלום. שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו, שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו, שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל.
And on page 44, giving thanks for this community, giving thanks for these prayers, giving thanks for the day of Shabbat itself, we offer these words.
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, שבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם, ברית עולם, ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת שבת וינפש שבת, שבת וינפש.
As we continue on page 46, I would again invite you to rise. Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Ve'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor Hanora, El Elyon, Gomer Chasadim Tovim, Ve'konei Hakol, Ve'zocher Chasei Avot V'imahot, Umevi Gula Livnei Bneihem, Le'man Shemo Ve'ahava, Melech Ozer U'Moshiach U'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham Ve'ezrat Sarah. Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechayeh HaKol atah Rav Le'Hoshia, Morid atah, Mechalkel Chaim Bechesed, Mechayeh HaKol Berachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim Verofeh Holim, Umatir Asurim, Umekayem Emunato Lishenei Afar, Michamocha B'Gevurot, Umido Melach, Melech Memit Umechayeh, Umatzmiach Yeshua, V'ne'eman atah l'chayot hakol. Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayeh hakol. Atah kadosh v'shimcha kadosh, u'kdoshim b'chol yom yalucha selah. Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el hakadosh. I invite you to be seated as we turn to the prayer for peace found on page 60 in our prayer books.
Shalom Rahava Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rahava Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki atahu melech adon lechol hashalom. Ki atahu melech adon lechol hashalom. Shalom Rahava Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rahava Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. V'tov beinecha levarech et Amcha Yisrael bechol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. שלום רב ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. שלום רב ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. תשים לעולם. תשים לעולם.
To these words of prayer that have sustained generations of our people, we add the silent prayers and meditations that can only come from each of our own hearts as we continue in a moment of silent prayer. On page 62.
יהיו לרצון ימי פי ויוני בי לפניך. אדוני צורי, אדוני צורי וגואלי יהיו לרצון ימי פי ויוני בי לפניך. אדוני צורי, אדוני צורי וגואלי.
On page 253 in our prayer book, we find words of Misha Berach Lecholim, our prayer for those who are ill and in need of God's healing, in need of our healing. We offer this prayer to God, hoping, praying for some type of intervention. That intervention may come from the medical system and the doctors and nurses and physicians' assistants and everyone who does their best. That intervention may come from a little bit of chicken soup and the healing touch that each of us can bring. That intervention may come from God, God's self. And we call to mind at this time those whom we are thinking in need of healing of mind, of body, of spirit. If there are friends or family, those of whom you are thinking this evening for our prayer for healing, I would invite you to share their name aloud. Baruch atah Adonai Rofeh HaCholim. Blessed are you, God, who brings a measure of comfort to all who are ill. And together we say, Amen.
Mi sheberach avotenu mekor habracha limahotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mi sheberach imahotenu mekor habracha vessels in need of healing, with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
I understand that some folks who are joining us online are experiencing some audio issues this evening, for which I apologize, but don't know what I could do about. And so perhaps I will offer these words in print immediately following our service, with apologies to all who are joining us in the sacred virtual space. When Politico published a draft Supreme Court ruling that would overturn the precedent set by Roe versus Wade, it revealed Justice Alito's thinking in pretty stark relief. Writing about why, in his words, previously heard cases, Roe and Casey, quote, must be overruled, he wrote, "The Constitution makes no reference to abortion, and no right is implicitly protected by any constitutional provision. If a right isn't explicitly mentioned in the Constitution, according to Justice Alito's line of thinking, it cannot be protected by the highest court in America." The release of this early draft shook the court as well as the country. Alito's ideological supporters cheered the looming end of a nationwide protection for abortion services access, while his ideological opponents sought to grapple with his brand of originalism, recognizing that such an argument could undo many different protections under the law. If it isn't explicitly mentioned in the Constitution, Alito argued, it can't be protected by the Supreme Court. Far greater minds than mine are attempting to understand the myriad ways Alito's philosophy is going to change America. And Temple Emmanuel knows well what I think and what Jewish tradition thinks about the need for access to abortion services. So let me turn instead to another way that we've been forced to confront this judicial philosophy in America. A particular, and I'm not so sure original, reading of the Second Amendment to the Constitution is being advocated for in the state of Texas tonight, in the very same state where 19 school children were murdered this week. In the view of the National Rifle Association Institute for Legislative Action, the Second Amendment, and I quote, states that as an American citizen, you have the individual right to arm yourself, The amendment also firmly established that the government cannot infringe on that right, end quote. Justice Alito certainly seems to agree, as he did in the case D.C. versus Heller and in his constitutional philosophy. And it appears that he's in the majority of the Supreme Court, that unless it's specified in the Constitution, it can't be protected as a right. So let me tonight also advocate for a constitutional amendment. Let's start with number 28. The right of children in the United States to attend school without fear of getting massacred in an act of gun violence. But there's no reason to stop there. Amendment 29, the right of Black people in the United States to visit their local grocery store without fear of getting massacred in an act of gun violence. Amendment 30, that the right of Jews, Christians, Muslims, Sikhs, and people of all faiths to practice the free exercise of religion protected in Amendment 1 without fear of getting massacred in an act of gun violence. Amendment 31, the right of people residing in urban areas to use public transportation system without fear of being massacred in an act of gun violence. Amendment 32, the right of people in the United States to pursue an occupation and to be physically present in their place of work without fear of getting massacred in an act of gun violence. Amendment 33, the right of people in the United States to attend leisure activities, including movies, concerts, nightclubs, all forms of entertainment, without fear of being massacred in an act of gun violence. I could go on, but by now you have realized that this is just a fantasy born out of my frustration. None of these amendments have a chance of passing because we live in a country whose politicians prioritize again and again making access to firearms easier than accessing baby formula, and clearly prioritize it over my non-codified and clearly hypothetical right to not be massacred in an act of gun violence. And we voted for them. Maybe you didn't, and maybe I didn't, but collectively as Americans, we sure did. Well, we said to ourselves, of course I don't want the kids at Robb Elementary School to have died. I really just wanted X matter of foreign policy or Y matter of a domestic social agenda. It's a price a whole lot of someone's, an electoral college and electoral map plurality, if not a majority of Americans, a whole lot of someone's, were willing and continue to be willing to pay. I'm not. And I would ask you tonight to consider not being willing to pay that price either. Because until we are willing to elevate stopping mass shootings on our elections priority list, nothing is going to change. Hold firm in your other convictions, please. I'm certainly not advocating for a uniformity of thought, God forbid, much less changes in political affiliation. I'm just asking that you make voting for kids' lives, and Black lives, and Jewish lives, and Christian lives, and all of the lives lost in the exclusively American epidemic of massacres through gun violence. I just ask that you move that to the top of your electoral priorities list. Something must change. Otherwise, our thoughts and our prayers and our grief, without any corresponding action, will continue to use God's name in vain. Shabbat Shalom. We turn back now in our Sidorim, we turn back in our prayer books to page 282. On the bottom of the page, page 282. And when you have found your page, you guessed it, I would again invite you to rise as we join together in prayer.
Alinu l'shabach l'adon hakol, l'tidgidu l'litzeh breshit, shelo asanu k'goyei haratzot, v'lo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama, Shalo samchakenu kahem, v'goralenu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu korim, umishtachavim umodim, lifnei melech, malchei hamlachim, hakadosh baruch hu, v'ne'emar, v'haya Adonai, lemelech al kol haaretz, bayom hahu, yihya Adonai echad, u'shemo echad.
You may be seated. Would you join me in the English on the bottom of page 291? There are stars up above, so far away we only see their light, long, long after the star itself is gone. And so it is with people that we loved. Their memories keep shining ever brightly, though their time with us is done. But the stars that light up the darkest night, these are the lights that guide us. As we live our days, these are the ways we remember. And indeed, we do remember those who have been taken from us recently and those whom we remember from this season in years past. This Shabbat, we mark the yahrzeit, the commemoration of the passing of Janet Ann Abramson, Alexander Baskin, Leonard H. Burles, Irving Kaplan, Lorraine Fabricant, Dr. Charles Friedland, Della Marcus Friedland, Clara Beth Grossman, Madeline Gunther, Esther Gusky, Evelyn Isco, Alan Jacobson, Stanley Zundy Kramer, Esther Leipzig, Wayne Lieberman, Marilyn Markovitz, George McKay, Bonnie Myers, Rose A. Palkovitz, Herbert Jacob Pardo, Norman Pukman, Rose Rao, Isidore Rosenberg, Earl Rostalski, Israel Saul Saginaw, Stella Sachs, Stephen Shake, Jenny Sivitz, Ann Cohen Stern, and Spencer Wallace. Shake, Jenny Sivitz, Ann Cohen Stern, and Spencer Wallace. If there are others you are remembering the Shabbat, or if I have inadvertently mispronounced the name of a loved one, I would invite you to share their name at this time. Yehei zichronam livracha. May the memory of all of our loved ones be for us an everlasting blessing. I would invite you to rise as we turn to page 294 in our prayer book, page 294, affirming together words of Kaddish Yatom, our mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, v'alma divrach irutei v'yamlik malchutei, b'chaye chon uvyome chon, uchaye dechol beit Yisrael, Ba'gala v'zman kariv v'imru, Amen. Yehei shemei rabbah mevarach le'alam olamei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yit'halal shemei d'kudsha barich hu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tush birchata v'nechamata. Damiran ba'alma v'imru, Amen. Yehei shalama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, Amen. Oseh shalom mimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, Amen. May God, who makes peace in the highest of heavens, make peace for us and for all who mourn. And together we say, Amen. You are welcome to be seated. But a few quick words of announcement before we finalize concluding our service. We've already begun concluding it. A special thank you to all who are joining us in person and all who are with us in sacred virtual community. I apologize again for the technical disruption, and we'll work on that for weeks to come. A special thank you to Rabbi Emily Meyer for joining us this evening, and to Leslie Hoffman for working her magic to make as much as possible happen in the technology space behind the scenes. Immediately following our service this evening, we invite you to join us in the foyer for an oneg, for a nosh, for a chance to catch up as people on the week that was and the week that we want to make the next one become. Tomorrow morning, our brief Shabbat morning service online only at 8:30, followed by Torah study at 9 o'clock, either on Zoom or in the community room immediately below us, followed by the celebration of Elias's bar mitzvah at 10:30 tomorrow morning, both in person and on Zoom. Rabbi Menachem Creditor was interviewed by congregant Dave Rullo this week as an unfortunate expert in gun violence prevention efforts. And when his daughter was born into a world immediately after September 11th, as he told us when he was with us in the congregation, he wrote the words, Olam Chesed Yibaneh, recognizing that it is truly our actions coupled with God that are going to make this world a better place. Let us continue to work for that day when our prayers and our actions combined.
Olam chesed yibaneh, yadadai, yadadai, yadadai. Olam chesed yibaneh, yadadai, yadadai, yadadai. Olam chesed yibaneh, yadadai, yadadai, yadadai. Olam chesed yibaneh, I will build this world from love, and you must build this world from love, and if we build this world from love, God will build this world from love. Olam chesed yibaneh, Olam chesed yibaneh, Olam chesed yibaneh, Olam chesed yibaneh,
With prayers for a safe and meaningful Memorial Day weekend. Shabbat Shalom.